All right, ladies and gentlemen, today I am joined by Marv, the CEO and founder of StarLance Studios, the company that's currently creating an RTS called ZeroSpace. What's up, Marv? How are you doing?
Hey Harstem, how you doing? Good. I'm doing very good.
I'm glad to hear that. I figured, just in case people don't know anything about you, could you just tell us your background in RTS or in gaming in general? Like, what have you been up to for the past 15 years or so?
Yeah, I guess my history has been a little bit on and there's so many different types of game uh, genres. Like I came in as a 3D engine programmer, and we did consoles and mostly PC games at the time. So I helped work on Medal of Honor. I helped work on Far Cry a little bit. And then after that, I went to Havoc and did like some of the AI behavior stuff, tools for them. Um, and then they do physics, but I didn't work on the physics side for them. And then after that, I've been doing casual games the whole time. So I did things like, we wanted to sell to like, 30, 40-year-old women at the time for the casual game side. So I did this really weird series of like, I don't know, this cactus game and just a bunch of weird little games. And then after that, Facebook hit, and I think a lot of people saw a lot of
Sorry,
opportunity.
for timeline, where are we right now? Cactus game is what, 2008?
Let me see, when is that? 2000, somewhere there. 2005, I think. 2005. I did a teddy bear game as well. You feed these teddy bears. So yeah, so going from something like Medal of Honor to this is very different. But and then after that, we went to do Facebook games, right? So we started looking at Facebook games and kind of the velocity they had. And the reason they had that velocity was Facebook was still kind of a wild west, and they allowed kind of viral sharing, and now they clamp it down. Everything has to be advertisement. They don't let you be viral at all. But back then it was crazy. And then if you can design a system that makes people want to share your game a lot, then you have a successful game. So we did these meta games. Basically, they're not really real. I wouldn't call them real games, but they're meta games, and a lot of Facebook and social games are meta games. So we did Castle Age, and then that was a hit. And then we transitioned to mobile right after that.
Sorry, what are meta games exactly? I don't quite understand it.
Okay. So these games that are more like meta game than real game are games that happen on the meta layer, where you don't have this real-time interaction usually, but it's kind of like if you had an overmap on a different game, it would just be the overmap game, right? So
I still don't understand it at all.
So something like Mafia Wars, for example. I don't know if that's one of the popular ones back then. You just click and say, "Hey, I leveled up my character," but you click a button,
Gotcha.
and the button levels up your character instead of you having to do anything particularly strategic, right? So you just click, click, click. I'm done. I'm now level 10, kind of thing. Yeah. I did this mission. So it's kind of the meta part of the game without the actual gameplay, right?
Okay.
So you could still progress. You could still progress, and the systems are quite deep. But there's no like moment to moment gameplay actually at all.
Yeah, I remember I used to play a game called Tribal Wars that was like this, where you had like little tribes and you could train like troops, but there was no actual no fighting with the troops. You could send them to plunder a village or whatever.
Yeah.
And you had when I was in high school, I think maybe even elementary school. So this must have been like 2006, 2007. We had this game called Online Soccer Manager, where basically every night, exactly at midnight, you would play a match that would be generated by the AI, and you could do like formations, and you could have like transfer stuff and stuff like that. So it's kind of like that.
That's cool that I even have formations. And here you just have like, you have 10 dragons or something. You buy a dragon, you click, and then,
Gotcha.
And yeah, things like that. But yeah, I think that to sell just a meta game is quite hard, and your systems have to be interesting enough at the same time. So mobile and Facebook designers, it was like a big challenge to just design really good meta games, and people became really good system designers. in those kind of genres. So yeah, so we did that. We went to mobile in 2009, 10, no, probably 8 actually. And then we did Underworld Empire there, and there we did like these. I mean, all these games are kind of like MMOs. They're basically everybody's on the same server. They can interact with each other. So that was really cool, and that was trying to leverage the whole social aspect of Facebook and mobile at the time. And basically, Underworld Empire, we had these 20 versus 20. Actually, no, it was like 40 versus 40, like Empire guild battles. Where this one, you would be on this kind of map, and you would be fighting each other as kind of like gangsters on the map, I guess. And you try to take each other's turf and territory. But it's like 40 players and 40 real time. And that was actually quite cool. And that's still going on in that app, but we've since sold that off.
Is that a game that from that period you're the most proud of? You don't seem very keen on the cactus or the teddy bear game or the meta game, but this one you seem a bit more proud of. Is that correct?
Yeah. We really enjoyed kind of designing these systems, and there's still a meta game kind of PvP, but it's like a 40 versus 40 PvP, and it was actually quite cool. It was very engaging, and that was like the main draw for our game. Once you get past the initial barrier of entries, yeah. So that was something. And then after that, we got sold to Kabam. Did a bunch of things at Kabam, and they're primarily a mobile game company. And we spun off when they got sold off, actually, and we continued working on a game we were working the whole time we were there and before. And that actually was an RTS. It was a mobile RTS, similar to Clash of Clans, but with like unit collision. So there's like a flow field pathfinding, a little bit different than StarCraft for sure. But we kind of got our hands wet on like pathfinding and a few other things that we do a lot of troops in real time, so real time mobile, not turn based. So that was kind of our first RTS type of game that we did. And then after that, yeah.
How long ago was that exactly?
That was maybe like 9 years ago, 10 years ago, so
Gotcha.
maybe 8 years ago. I'm sorry, I forget.
Time starts to change. Once you get a little older, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, especially with COVID, especially with kids.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how did you then decide at some point, hey, I want to make a StarCraft-like RTS? Like, where did that kind of come from?
Yeah, so I was just thinking of my next project for a while. This was about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago almost. And I really enjoyed StarCraft. I was still playing it for a while. StarCraft 1 was like one of those games that when I was a kid, just like whoa, I was so amazed by it, and it's everything about it, right? It's like the sound. When I first played that game, it was like the sound design was so good. It was scary. I was in a weird alien world. That's kind of what I felt when I played it. And I've been playing it for a while, and I heard the news that Blizzard was going to not support it anymore. And
Yeah.
I was pretty sad. Then I thought, I'm gonna try to work for like a year or so and see what I could prototype and see if I could come up with something that might be able to I knew StarCraft, and I knew the problems it had, and like something that would maybe figure out how to solve some stuff in the RTS space. And so I worked on a year alone, mostly about 3.5 years ago. So just like a whole year was me working around prototyping stuff. That was probably 4 years ago now, actually. And then after that, I started bringing people in to help get some art in. And then after that, I actually brought Pig, Grant, and Cats really early on to start just, hey guys, like look what I have here. Can you guys help me figure out what's how this can work, how we can kind of change up RTS and take it to a better place. And I knew I was watching them for a while, back then as well, and so I knew of them, and I pitched out to multiple different people, but actually they were actually some of the top people that I reached out to, and then I showed them a video, and they were like, okay, this looks cool, so yeah, we'll do it. we'll consult for you kind of thing. So they've been doing that for over 3 years now.
How long ago? Okay, so that's been 3 years since those group of consultants kind of came in, right?
Yeah.
And how much has changed since then? Like how far off were
A
you?
ton.
Yeah, okay.
A ton, yeah. So we tried, like, I think what Grant said in one of his videos is we just try everything, and that makes things take a lot longer to kind of develop. But we've tried creep camps. We've tried variations of creep camps where they respawn over and over. We tried variations where they don't. We tried, we just tried a lot of different things, but we didn't feel good with the creep camps, so then we just didn't use them. Then we tried control towers, which is Grant's idea, and we were like, okay, this feels pretty good. And then we kept iterating on it and seeing how to balance it and everything and make it not snowbally, because the problem with control towers is they could be really snowbally. And to do that, we added like a base XP tick rate on the player itself, and then the control towers would only add a little bit more tick rate, for example. Then we had to figure out what would they unlock that would be interesting, right? So we added faction talents. But we tried, like, we would go one way and then we'd say nope, and we'd take it back the other way. It was really nice because we were a small team. I was basically the only programmer for a while, for at least like a year and a half, and then we were two programmers for like good 2.5 years. And we only brought more people in pretty much the last year and a half.
And how large is the team now? Because so for just for context, the first time I heard about it was, I think, last year August is when you guys started bringing people in. It was pretty funny because I got a message. I think either Cats or Pick was like, "Hey, there's like this RTS, and I never heard of it. You can just come on a call and look at it." And then when I saw it, it looked pretty solid already. And at that point, it was just you and one other programmer, or more people had been in at that point already.
So we're about four programmers now. So we're kind of still a small team in that sense. But yeah, that was like probably 3 programmers back then. We just got one more recently, I think. Yeah, but yeah, the team itself though, like, I think we're really art dependent. So there's about 20 people total, designers, art, and programmers, and a little bit of marketing. And Iron Ward, who did Red Solstice 2 and the Red Solstice series, we reached out to them. I knew one of them, and then they said they could help us, and so they're kind of part of the company in a way. They have shares in the company. And they've helped us with an additional 10 people on the team that did the art, right? So actually back here, this is some Ironward, mostly Ironward art here. So they did this.
Okay, could you just kind of walk me? I'm kind of curious the process of getting started in general, just by yourself. Like, what did the first year and a half look like when you're just sitting there? Because you thought you had some ideas to improve StarCraft 2. Like, what were those, and how far are you now? But just in general, like kind of the timeline of what have you been doing from the start?
Yeah. So a lot of what I've been doing, like year 1, was groundwork, right? Foundation of the engine itself, making sure Unreal can run an RTS, which is actually quite hard. It's not built for that. So a lot of systems had to be redone or really modified. To make it support like 1,000 units on the screen, for example, right? And then even now we're still trying to optimize that, and we're still trying to take away Unreal systems, because it actually doesn't run 1,000 units on some machines. It does on my machine, but not on everybody's. So that was a large part of it. And then, but while I was doing that, I got the chance to think a lot about system design for RTS, and what it would take to bring modern RTS to the world. And what I was thinking about is, like, you have all these games these days, and why do people play it? So you got these genres that do really well. So battle royale genres do well, MOBA genres do pretty well. Kind of underlying all that, even Minecraft genre, right? And underlying all that is a thing where there's a lot of replayability. There's a lot of variety in every kind of session you are doing, and RTS kind of doesn't really support that very well, right? So and that's why the game sometimes is like balanced to a T as well. Well, basically, the lack of variety makes the systems not have to support the variety, but that also means that you end up with these systems that become very snowbally. So StarCraft is very snowbally, for example, and like even in the early game, 3 Marines can just of a difference in the early game can give you victory, right? And then later game, like you lose like 5 SCVs, and you probably lost already, but it's kind of a slow grind after that. Tours getting that finality to it.
So sorry, because you say there's not a lot of variety in RTS, but I do feel like that a lot of the games play out very different. Like if you think of like Warcraft 3, like I feel like there definitely with like the creep camps and those paths, there's some set patterns, but and also in StarCraft 2, it does feel like most games are somewhat different. Like they follow somewhat set patterns, but I'm not like I wouldn't necessarily say that. Like I feel there's very high replayability. I've been playing it for 14 years.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. It's more about like the moment to moment, like at a certain minute, like minute 3 TVZ, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have like a similar 1 or 2 or 3 choices maybe, but it doesn't kind of change beyond that as much. And then like minute 5, and then you can branch out differently, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're talking about like MOBAs and PUBG, it's just beyond that, right?
Right, because it's like if you think of MOBAs, there's just like 100 heroes per like in a game, which means that every other game is gonna be different. So is the solution then to introduce, like in StarCraft, you have like the 3 races, which means that you have very limited types of opponents as well. Is the goal then to have like is that why you added the mercenary factions to kind of have more variety already in the early game? So could you talk a bit about the mercenary factions in case people are not aware?
Yeah. So we have our system is we actually want to do like 6 factions initially, but we kind of brought it back down to 4, and we have 4 factions. We're gonna have 7 mercenaries. And these mercenaries kind of add 5 units to each faction, and the factions themselves don't have the 15 standard that StarCraft has only 10.
Mm-hmm.
So you go like 10, add 5 from a mercenary, and then add a hero out of a pool of 15 later, which would be like 2 hero choices per main faction and 1 hero choice for the mercenaries. And from this kind of permutation, you get your starting faction, basically. And so the idea is really to kind of add that variety and that flexibility. And if you have enough variety, you can actually help kind of self-balance in a way where, you're not going to be using all those permutations. That's true. So probably like, if you're one faction, let's say if you're Protectorate or if you're Grell, you might opt to take 2 or 3 of the mercenaries, but not like the rest as most of the time, unless you're trying for a particular playstyle, and that's okay. It's just that this will help both a little bit pushing variety a little bit, but on top of that, it'll push, it'll help kind of self balance in a way, right? And so we just have to make sure that things don't break, things are not OP. But other than that, there's always kind of a counter choice to your mercenaries to help kind of mitigate if you're playing against a swarmy race, for example. You might want a mercenary that does AoE splash, right? There would be a few of those around. So yeah, it just helps with player choice there, and also player expression. So it's like, what kind of mercenary do you like to play, and then your play style kind of gravitates towards 1 or 2 of them as well. And so everybody will have a little bit of a different play style, and there's no like set way to play. And so there's just it doesn't bump variety like 300% or anything like that. But I do think it adds value to the game, and gives it a little bit more sense of replayability for the casual players especially.
Yeah, and with a neat side effect is that I think one of the things that is most frustrating for, I want to say, majority of StarCraft or RTS players in general is the mirror matchup. I think most people dislike playing mirror matchups because it often feels extremely like even more snowbally than others, especially if the game is very figured out in certain stages. Is that losing one Stalker in the early game in a PvP can mean that you lose map control, and once you lose map control, it's all downhill from there. And if you have different mercenary factions, I guess you kind of Yeah, kind of outmaneuver the mirror altogether. Because I
Yes.
guess you could still have a true mirror if both play the exact same Merc faction, but if there's some counterability there,
There's a
then
heroes too, like heroes
oh,
too. You
you're
get to
right.
pick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the mirrors really suck because of timings, right? Your timing is exactly the same as their timing. So when you're strong is exactly when they're strong in this area. So then you get very like binary choices where you can't. Maybe the gap between one timing and another timing is so far that you have to really win the first timing or else you lose. Like Zerglings, for example, right?
Hmm.
You go Zerglings forever for a while until you get to Banelings, right? And if there wasn't any Banelings, then what would you do? You'd probably be a game of just mass Zerglings the whole time, which is what happened to us actually. We had that happen. Uh, as a meta game because we didn't have a transition on a mirror, right? Mirror, Grell, you'd have stingers, which is similar to Zerglings, and because you don't have a transition away from that quick enough to be able to kind of get to a different type of troop comp and timing.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very tough. In general, is there anything else? So you got your mercenary factions, and then you mentioned anti-snowball play as well. What type of systems do you have in place to try and make it less snowbally? Because the moment you're talking about having to control area of the map, I feel like very often that can also kind of enable snowbally play, right? Once you have that and it gives you a boost, then how are you going to lose it?
Yeah. There's two sides to this. Like we actually want snowball in the later games to give more volatility to the game because otherwise it gets pretty stale. And if it's like it's back and forth the whole time, and nobody's actually really winning, and it's not very fun. But in the early game, we want to prevent where it's like you just do one mistake. I think when I play StarCraft at least, and I think I've heard when a bunch of other players play StarCraft, sometimes it's like the first person to make a big mistake kind of loses more so than anything, right? It's like you might be playing perfectly for 20 minutes and you just make a somewhat moderate mistake and he didn't, and you technically lost already at that point. And so we kind of want to prevent that. And RTS is inherently super snowbally compared to other genres. So in RTS the biggest factor that makes it snowbally is our two things: are economy and troops, right? So economy is snowbally because if you're greedy and you go 3 base, you suddenly just plow through the other guy, right? So that's why macro is so important SC2, especially under masters, because that's kind of the main way to kill someone is actually to out macro them, and it just economic expansion is exponential. Same thing with troop battles, though. So on top of this exponential economic expansion, if you have 4 Marines or 5 Marines versus 2 Marines, the 5 Marines win, but probably with 5 Marines, right? It's not like
Yeah.
5 versus 2 is 3. It's not like that. That's not
Yeah.
RTS math, and that's all against very snowbally, right? So to get back to somewhat more of a linear advantage, you got to add snowball systems in, and it makes the game a lot more interesting. It doesn't mean that if you lose troops you're going to win or get advantage. That doesn't mean that at all. It's just trying to reel it back in. And so we put anti-snowball systems that include the top bar energy. When your units die, you get this top bar energy, and you can use this top bar energy in unique ways. So in the case of Grell, they could infuse their units, and then when you infuse a unit, you use top bar energy, but the units become twice as big, twice as healthy, twice as damaging, actually. So it's a really interesting way, but they also take twice the supply. So it's still stronger than adding another unit, but it's a very interesting way of kind of doing things because you can, for example, save all this top bar, and you could kind of go into a unit comp that is very heavy on a unit without having to produce those units right? So you basically say, hey, I want to go air because they're killing my they have a really big ground army. So what you do is you lost all your army, you top bar, and you infuse all your maybe 4 air units, and they get double HP. So you doubled the size of your air army all of a sudden with the infuse. So that's an interesting mechanic, and it also is anti-snowball mechanic. Mercenaries themselves are also anti-snowball mechanics. Basically, what they do is, I think in casual play, you start floating all these minerals. And mercenaries are kind of like Nova co-op call downs. Like when in Nova co-op, you can call down, the Marine and the Marauder, and they cost money, but
Hmm.
they don't take time to build. They just
Yeah,
instantly
they're on
appear.
cooldown, right? It's
Yeah,
like
they're on cooldown.
are they at a mercenary compound, or is that not what it's called? There might be
They,
another
they
co-op thing.
yeah, they're not. The mercenary compound is actually very similar to regular mercenary compound. Yeah. Um, and so yeah, basically you have these charges of mercenaries you can have. So you forgot to spend money. You have 1K banked, um, and you're like, oh shit, and then I gotta get some more troops, so you can instantly use these charges to get mercenaries. You don't want to do that still, right? And the other thing it does is it allows you to remax faster. So you lost 30 supply in the field, and you're kind of now, usually it's a GG at this point, right? But you get these guys, if you've been floating, that means you've also not been competing at a very good level since you've been floating. That then you use these mercenary charges, and now you're kind of back in the fight again for a little bit. But now you are out of mercenary charges, and he has mercenary charges if you do push into him well enough. So it's still not like it's not a big advantage, but it does help you survive. It does help you make plays, and you still have to outplay your opponent considerably to get a win. But it's not like GG at that point, right? Um, so those are two of the biggest ones. I probably forget the other ones right now. Yeah, those are two of the biggest anti-snowball mechanics that we have in the game
Okay, I like
at the
that.
moment.
What about maps? How do you view that? Because you mentioned you want to up the replayability. Is your goal to also have a very large map pool as a result? Or do you prefer having a more StarCraft size map pool where it's either 7 or 9 maps and you kind of rotate through those and then maybe in a new season have new ones? Because you could imagine a world where if you just have, I don't know, like 1,000 different maps, that practically every game is played on a new map. It wouldn't be very easy to balance, and it might be difficult to predict what's going to happen. But at least all games are very different.
Yeah, I mean that's always the balance trade-off there, right? So if we can't balance something, if it makes it harder to balance, it's probably not something we want to do. We're actually thinking of like it's very similar to StarCraft map pool. Um, our maps don't define the matchups as well as StarCraft's maps define their matchup, right? So StarCraft, their matchups are well defined by the maps because the terrain is so important. Walling off is so important, and Reaper cliffs and all that Blink Stalker um, stuff is it just makes each map super super different in how they add replayability value, but it also makes the maps a lot harder to design, right? And a lot and you get basically like similar design maps with a few tweaks, but they still play super different because even minor tweaks, even though they look the same, even minor tweaks, because StarCraft is so sensitive to high ground, low ground, and choke points that it makes a ton of difference, and that's why you get similar maps, but they do play quite different. We're trying a lot of different styles of maps. We've been trying like AoE, more open style. We've been trying more choke point style in StarCraft, and we're still trying to figure out which one is kind of the best design for us, and which one. And we might have the map pool have both, right? Right. Currently, we do have the map pool have both, and we're trying to get kind of player feedback on whether it's a good thing, and whether both of them actually have merit in our game.
Isn't it also that I played StarCraft, I think, from the very start. And
Mhm.
in my mind, at the very start of StarCraft 2, the maps were less important as they are now. Back then, I couldn't necessarily look at a map and its features and be like, oh, this is a good Protoss map, or oh, this is a good Zerg map. I feel like very often what happens with maps is once players become very good at abusing certain things, or they kind of understand certain things, is that then maps become much more important because people just understand the game more. Is it also just possible that it's, not so much that ZeroSpace doesn't have that yet, rather than it will never be there?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. I think there's a big learning curve that we have to do to get to figure out how maps actually affect matchups, right? Um, and we're going to go through that. But I do think that at the same time, walling off is so important in StarCraft just from the get-go, right? And walling off is not as important for us from the get-go. So that already is the big difference right now, in terms of like map design. So we have a little bit more open map design wise. But at the same time, like what variety does it add to the player pool? We're trying to figure out and experiment with that.
Yeah, because earlier you mentioned like what is the best, or like what type of map is the best, the open or small. Like how do you guys kind of define that? Like what are you looking at for? Like this is like what is it you want in your gameplay? Do you want a very active map, or do you kind of appreciate like the mech style, where a guy just sets up 30 tanks and 5 planetaries? Like, oh, this is good gameplay. Like what is
Goody.
Yeah, Goody. Would Goody be happy
play
playing?
Our game. Yeah, I know. I hope he would. Let me think. We're trying to do like all, as many styles as we can, and that doesn't feel bad for the other player to compete against. So we have this very like we actually had a 4th faction already, all done, robot faction. But the feel of that faction was not good enough. We iterated a bit, and it's basically very tower defense style. You could set up like 4 types of turrets. You have these energy pylons that power them up, and you can kill the energy pylons to kill turrets, similar to the kind of Protoss pylons. It worked a little differently, but yeah, like the problem with that one was that it wasn't fun to play against, right? So they would just like, this one is not mech. This is just, they're building out the entire map with towers, and even if they're out of minerals, it's like, like you want to play against, in StarCraft, like it used to, like before the current latest patches, it used to kind of go into that territory with Skymech versus tons of spore crawlers, right? It's just really annoying gameplay. So we just completely took it out. We'll probably figure that out again later. But we want to empower gameplay, any gameplay that people think is fun, as long as it doesn't make the other side not have a good time.
And when it comes to generally like patches or basically gameplay update cycles, like what are you thinking? I think initially in StarCraft 2, I think one of to me it feels like a mistake is that the gameplay, I think in general in RTS, can get a little bit stale over time if nothing new gets introduced, whether that be new maps and like really new type of maps, or new units or upgrades or abilities or whatever, or just things get changed around. I feel like those are always exciting periods, and although sometimes it doesn't quite pan out the way you want it to, I do believe that more constant patching to me feels better. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the team is really like the team we've kind of built out, like Cats especially. He's really for changing the meta quite a bit. We don't know how often we want to change the meta to kind of a very drastic level, but we do intend to kind of inject new heroes, new mercenaries, or a change in how they work a little bit to keep the meta fresh to some degree. This is where actually RTS variety kind of shows that there's a limit to what you can achieve with the current system design for RTS, right? And in MOBAs, you definitely could add a new hero, but I would argue that it's not as stale even without adding a new hero. Like you go to the Heroes of the Storm, they haven't added a new hero for, I don't know, 2 years, 2 years, somewhere like there. And people, I still find it fun whenever I go in, and I don't feel like I've played the matchup maybe for months or something like that a lot of times. So I think like that this is kind of where RTS, when you've played like a whole year of the same meta, it starts feeling very stale because it's so optimized, right? Because the moment to moment, you really do have only 2 choices at minute 2 or 3. You have maybe more, but then once you get locked into the timing windows, and so like what they can do, you're like, oh shit, I can only really do this to counter, and then it starts getting a little bit more rigid. So we want to carefully kind of introduce new meta. We don't like to break people's play style as well, though, so that's kind of the balance and trade-off you got to do.
All right. I I think we covered most of our gameplay thoughts now. I actually kind of want to talk about generally how it is to build an RTS, like reception. First of all, when you got started, I think you're self-funded at StarLance Studios, right? So you pay most of it out of own pocket.
Yeah. So when we sold our company to Gabam, we made enough that I was able to put money into this venture after I did a year of kind of programming for myself. Basically, so far I've put in like about 1.5 million into the company. We've got about 500,000 off Kickstarter. We're actually looking for a publisher and just more investors. I still have money to put in at the moment to kind of get us to a good place, a decent place. But we're definitely still looking for a little bit more help there. We've been very efficient with our spend. So far because I haven't paid myself and I've done a lot of the programming basically. But yeah, like it's kind of scary at the same time, right? Putting
Well,
that much
1.5
money.
million. I knew you put in quite a bit, but I didn't know it was 1.5 million. Yeah, I can imagine that's pretty scary.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's also a sunk cost to some degree because you're like, I want to make this succeed. I've already put in 1 million, so it's like, but it's like I can't get stretched that far. I have a kind of a certain budget that I'm
Okay.
allowing myself to do, but at the same time, you really want to see it succeed, and you see it already take root here when the community really likes it, so that's super supportive, and it gives us more confidence, right, that we have a good product on our hands. But yeah, it's just definitely scary, right? So games cost a lot these days to make in general. We've been lucky and we've been kind of like being very indie about it, very scrappy about it. Most games don't cost this much, right? So there's other indies that are even better at asset efficiency, like Godsworn. They're like insane. There are only 2 developers. We have 30 at this point at least. So yeah, so like it would be hard if we didn't have the community reception, I think. And games in general, if you go to the game dev section on Reddit, this is the exact kind of discussion you would be seeing between the game devs. Basically, it's like how do you commit so much into a game these days? Because a lot of the games that sell well actually have the founders, they dedicate like 5 years to it, or even 8 years to it, right? So like a lot of their lives are dedicated towards making a game successful, and that's kind of like the thing you have to do these days, because everybody values games off of the gameplay, the value they get from the games, the entertainment value, not anything else. And you got to make a good game. Really, that's and it's hard to make a good game. It's hard to make a good game. It takes a long time. It takes so much development work because everybody's upping the ante. It's just like I don't know how many Steam games is coming out these days, but it's like it doubles every year or something for a while. So you're competing against a lot of noise, a lot of people trying, but a lot of people dedicating like 8 years, and still sometimes failing. And so that's a risky proposition, but when you really like what you're doing, when you're really passionate about like I've been in games for 20 years, right? And I already knew I was going to be in games since I was in middle school, pretty much, I think. So I was playing MUDs back then, those multi-user online dungeons, and I was trying to code a MUD, and that was really fun. So yeah, so it's just our life is making games, and we got to do it, and this is the industry now. But there's also a lot of opportunity because you got something like Unreal's insane. Like back then I was an engine programmer, and now I'm not needed anymore, so that's why I'm doing this, right? Okay.
It's nice as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, but for the general, like, how far are you from launching ZeroSpace, or how far are you guys from launching ZeroSpace? Like, what is the kind of the timeline? You said you're still looking for a publisher as well. Is that a necessity for you guys to finish?
We have contingencies in place to figure out how to finish. Our Versus is relatively pretty complete. We're really close. We'll definitely be able to launch that without any additional support. the co-op, the campaign is starting along. We've got some cinematics coming up later next week probably, and a prologue mission to accompany that. And the co-op is we have like a few co-op maps and things that we're testing around. But yeah, like I think the versus is pretty solid at this point, and we're basically gonna look for early access sometime end of this year or next year maybe. We're not really sure yet. It really depends on the kind of the funding. We're pretty hopeful for a publisher because last year was really bad for the game industry. Obviously, there's a lot of layoffs. There's the whole Embracer Group problem. I don't know if you heard about that.
I haven't heard of it. Could you tell me what it is?
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, they they got like a vocal kind of deal from some Saudi princes or something that they would get like 2 or 3 billion in more investment, right? And so they bought up all these companies based on that kind of deal, and then didn't materialize. And then basically the whole of last year was them selling companies, laying off whole studios, and it was just such a mess. And they bought out, I mean, a lot of publishing companies, right? So for us, we were talking to like 3 of their publishing companies, I think, or maybe 4. But that's also it's indicative of the whole trend in gaming post COVID, where a lot of studios overhired, and that's why a lot of massive layoffs kind of were seen, and people were kind of going back and saying, hey, I don't have to be at home all the time playing video games, and a lot of people were kind of wanted to enjoy the outdoors, right? At that point after COVID.
Idiots.
Yeah, and then that's why it's a bad time for the game industry. I think funding in general was like 3 times less that year than any other year, and most other years on average. So we're hopeful that this year is going to be better.
Okay, gotcha. So then early access somewhere at the end of this year, start of next year. What are like the main goals? Because you said your versus is pretty done. Is there going to be are you guys happy with how everything is, or is there going to be like some major polish rounds still, or like what's kicking off there?
Yeah, so for versus, we're going to add a new race. We're going to add the Zal, and we're going to add probably another mercenary faction and a few more heroes. So those are the last things for versus that we have to kind of tune up. We're definitely want to flesh out the factions more too, because obviously I think what our approach to kind of design has been super iterative, and things on paper don't always work out. Most often always don't work out in the gameplay side when you actually play the game. So we actually have to iterate, and so that's happening with the units and the factions we're introducing. We're like, oh, this would be cool. Put them down, play with it. It's not cool enough, or there's some problem with it, or the design just doesn't work well with the way units interact in our game, and we got to change it. So kind of that kind of fine polish is what Versus is going through right now in our current playtests, and our community has been super helpful in kind of helping identify these problems and kind of also kind of be a sounding board for us. We think this is a problem, and they're like, yeah, this is definitely a problem. So that's like for sure then we're gonna change it. Yeah, so that's super helpful when that happens.
You gotta be careful though, listening too much to the community. Yeah, most of them are well-meaning, but everyone gets a little bit excited once their race is not performing the way they want to.
That's true. But when you already think about it, then that's always a good basis to go off of. And so we also want to do animation polish and sound effects polish. And most of the sound effects didn't come in till maybe like earlier this year. So we really got to polish like the animation sound effects as the units get more set, because we've been changing so much. Like it would cost too much to put in a lot of work initially if we just keep changing the units, right? I think in StarCraft the Hellion went through 60 design changes or something, so that was like insane. So they do that a lot as well, right? And so we just got to be cognizant with what we have.
So far, the main focus seems to have been just make sure that the gameplay is as good as possible. And then once you're pretty happy with that and the way the races function, then you want to really kind of polish up on things like animation, sound, the way everything looks.
Yeah. Like right now, the impact of things is just not good enough. Right. When you see a Marine in StarCraft shoot, it's like bam, 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 and it feels good. It even lights up the scene. And when you see our animation, it's like that or something. This is weird. So yeah, things like that. Just we gotta fix those up.
But do you think this is all doable for early access, or is this like going to be an ongoing project while the game is in early access?
It'll be mostly done by early access, we think, for this kind of level of polish for the current factions we have. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then I actually have a question because it feels like in the past we've been having more RTSs pop up every now and again now in the past few years. You've been looking at Stormgate as well, I can imagine. Is it a little bit of a rivalry or just good friends? Like how do you kind of see that with Stormgate?
No, I think they're doing really great. I mean, great things. Like when I was first starting, I was a year when I was doing like my self programming, right, for this game, trying to figure out the foundation and everything. And they kind of had news on their company forum, and I was actually really excited, right? I was starting to get super hyped because that's why I was also making this game.
So it was like, a new game.
Yeah, I'm like, should I finish this game or should I just wait?
Did you consider like maybe applying for them or?
I did actually. I did consider applying for them. I didn't want to move or anything though, so I was just thinking about it. I'm like, because I know they're in Irvine and I'm in California, so there'd be probably incentive to kind of move down there. But eventually, I had already been like 6 months, maybe 5 months in when they announced the project. I don't remember, just like mucking around with stuff and I wasn't in a phase where I wanted to be like. So I have like 3 kids, and at that point I was also like my kid was like probably 1 and 3 at that point. I remember, and so there's a lot for me to do, and I was doing I wasn't even programming full time, right? Initially, I was programming more like half time, and so I just didn't have the commitment level. And then as the further along I got on this project, the more I said, okay, I should finish it, versus going off there, but definitely was thinking about maybe applying to Stormgate when I saw the job openings open up.
Can imagine. Have you shown the game to your kids?
I have actually. I have just recently, and he just keeps saying, "I want to play ZeroSpace." And the problem is that he's 6 years old. So the problem is that it's the first game he's seen, and I've had this discussion with my other programmer friends. I'm a programmer, and I want my kid to program. And my other programmer failed at getting his kid to program, and we kind of try to figure out why. It was really interesting. I think, or at least I think, it's because these days you're not exposed to games like Pong, and so you're like Pong, you see it, and you're like, oh, I could do that, simple enough, right? And then, or like even like something like Zelda back then, like you could think about doing things like that. But then these days you get Fortnite and these other crazy games. Yeah. You don't even think about it. You don't even think about that you could make that. You're just like, all right, I'm gonna play.
And good luck making that in Game Maker.
yeah, exactly. So there's just you're just a complete disconnect into what the process involved to do that, and then so nobody aspires to do that if they have been exposed. So that's why I haven't exposed my kid to any game. I want to start back from what I did. So I actually got the new Atari thing that they came back out with, and so my kid has played Pong, and my kid has played Breakout, and I want to kind of feed him these steps of games into in a sense, show him the evolution, have him experience and have fun with all those steps, right? Just like I did. I know it's kind of like maybe like, I don't know, brainwashing him in a way, but
but it's cool. It's cool as well. If you start with Fortnite immediately, Pong is not going to be quite as exciting anymore. And if you start with Pong, imagine how much their brains are going to be blown once they get to Fortnite. It's going to be real.
Exactly. It feels good, and they also like are more like, oh, I could probably do that or something. So, but anyway, yeah, like I let him play ZeroSpace like the other week, and that's the first of that type of game that he's played, right? So he's never played any type of crazy game like that, and he was just addicted to it. He played for like a couple hours actually, just building buildings, getting up to 10,000 resources banked and everything.
Did you flame it for his macro, or you were like, I'll let it be?
No, man. Well, we're just 6 years old. I can't. Yeah, you would do that. Maybe you would do that.
You see, you come at it from a programmer angle. I come at it from a pro gamer angle. If my kid is floating 10K, man, he's over.
yeah. So I wonder if what would you have? If are you gonna have kids? And if you have kids, are you gonna train them at an early age and then try to be the next?
I'm not starting with Pong either.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, oh my gosh, he's gonna be like. He's gonna be a prodigy though. So
he's gonna be a beast. At 12, he'll be in the GSL of ZeroSpace, perhaps then.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So I got to stop him from playing it, but he likes it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I can imagine that must feel pretty good. Did you show him any of your older games, or not so much?
No, they're not. I mean, I've worked a little bit on like the old Medal of Honor game and stuff like that, but I don't even have access to that, so I didn't show him that. And my other old games are just not. They're just not that interesting, I guess. Yeah.
I play a lot of Marvel for your kid.
Oh yeah, those ones. I could show those, I guess. I just
stick with ZeroSpace for now. All right. Yeah. So I don't really have any questions. I think we covered it pretty well. Is there anything else you'd like to get off your mind, or you're good as well?
No. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks for the interview.
Well, usually this is where people plug something that's coming up. You can't just say thanks for the interview.
You didn't ask me to plug anything.
Yeah, but it's like it's anything that's on your mind. This is when you say, well, we have.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry. Basically, yeah, I think to help the ZeroSpace project, it'd be great if you guys can wish list ZeroSpace on Steam, because what that does is it helps us launch really big. So the more wish lists you have on Steam, the way it works is the more wish lists you have on Steam, and when you launch, you're competing for kind of the top promotion that Steam gives for the launch. And the more wish lists you have, the more you'll show up on top. And the more you show up on top, the more people you'll reach. So wish lists really help with that. So it doesn't cost anything to wish list, and that'd be like one of the biggest helps that we can have for a game is to wish list. And then if you really want to play, we're going to have a few more alpha sessions between now and the end of the year. I think there's a backer kit for ZeroSpace. You can find all our links on the Play ZeroSpace Reddit. There's a sticky all links in there. And you could play right now, and there's about 1,000 or so people that have access to the game at this point. More than 1,000 people. And we'll be showing more things soon. Yeah.
Okay. Sick. Thanks so much for your time. I know you're a busy man. Kat's told me that most of the time you're coding, so I'm going to let you get back to it. And thanks so much. I really appreciate all the time and the answers.
Yep. Thank you, Harstem. And if you like this video, please press the follow button down below.
And subscribe and comment. And
subscribe and comment.
All right. Thanks, Marv.
Comments actually help a lot. So.
Really?
I think it helps the YouTube algorithm a lot. So the more, if you have tons of comments and basically engagement levels, right? It makes YouTube promote your video more because they like that activity.
Then be sure to comment, guys, and like it. All right. Thanks, Marv.